Okay, so let's take a minute and talk about safety. One of the things that scares the bejeebers out of me is always pulling a front spring out, because that spring is under a lot of pressure. And so I've seen a lot of people come up with different ways of compressing or holding the spring in place, most of which I don't think are very safe. You can Google spring accidents all over the place, and they're very scary. So what I did, I spent a little money, and I bought a coil spring compressor. I got mine from Advanced Auto. You can get them from O'Reilly or wherever. You can rent them. I bought mine because I know I'm going to be using it a lot. The way it works is pretty simple. You saw where we took out the shock and pulled it out from the bottom previously. We're going to take this, it's right here, has a couple of hooks on it and a threaded rod, and we're actually going to put this right up where we just took our shock out, right? So we're going to shove it up here, like so. And then these two clips are going to clip on to either side. We're going to put a foot, here if you can see this, we're going to put this foot inside here. This is for demonstration purposes only. We're going to put this foot in here, like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tighten this thread. And what it's going to do is it's going to hold that spring at its current compression. It's going to lock it and keep it safe, so that then we can drop the two control arms and not have the spring pop open at some ungodly spring rate, and it can do you a lot of bodily harm. So we're going to use this again, this spring compressor. We're going to put it. I'm going to show you how I put it in the car, but I wanted to show it to you out here, just to show you the importance of safety. I would not take a spring out without some apparatus like this. It's well worth the money if you can't afford it. You can rent it. It's very inexpensive to rent for a day, and that's that. Safety first. Okay, so we're about ready to get started on removing the lower and the upper control arms. And again, the first one we're going to do is we're going to put this spring compressor inside the spring so that it doesn't pop out and cause bodily damage. The other thing I want you to notice is there's a jack right here under the lower control arm, and it's in place. Just again, as a safety precaution, make sure nothing pops. So we're going to take this spring compressor and we're going to put it right up, right exactly where we had the shock. And it takes a little fishing, but it does fit, because I did the other side. Get it all the way up there, because you gotta find room to put the tail plate. So keep pushing until you get to the top. And make sure both of those jaws on either side have grabbed a piece of spring, and I went under and I can see that. Then you're going to take this tail piece here, this indentation here, right where that is, that goes at the bottom to collect the washers, and then what I'm going to do is just screw this up. The directions specifically state not to use an impact wrench for doing this, so I'm not. So I'll get it up here by hand, and then in a minute I'll switch over to a ratchet. And then once I get it relatively tight in place, I'll take a 1/2-inch drive ratchet and a 3/4 socket, and I'm actually now going to apply my own pressure to that spring. I'm actually going to compress it a bit. As you can see, the spring is starting to loosen up, which tells me that it's now under pressure, and it's safe now to drop the upper and lower control arms without having this spring pop open on me. With the spring secure, and I know it's not going to pop out on me now, let's get on to our favorite exercise of removing cotter pins and crown nuts, right? This is on the bottom, obviously. Take this out. Alright, let's get this next cotter pin out here. Cotter pin and crown nut. Here we go. It's on the top. We're using a 3/4, by the way. Oops, right here. Second. Well, it would help if I turned it the right way now, wouldn't it? Let's try this again. Okay, we got the cotter pin off. And here comes the nut. Ta-da! Victory. One thing that I forgot that's really important, of course I always forget these things, don't take this nut all the way off. Leave it on a little bit, because when we pop this, I want this to drop down, but I don't want it to accidentally just come completely crashing off. So this helps keep a little safety and a little control over your situation. Okay, here's moment of truth. Hopefully a little tap here will loosen this up. And there it is. A tap will do ya. And that's why I kept the nut on, because I didn't want it to just come crashing off. So now I can take the nut off myself. And again, I have my jack on here. Get this nut off. Just need a second. We're loose. See that? And one more tap and we'll get this thing off here. Okay. Alright. So now what we have exposed, now I should be able to just let the jack down slowly and this spring should come off. So I'm going to stand back because you're on a camera, you're safe. And let's let her down, see what happens. Oh baby. How about that? Good fortune. That's out safely. And the spring comes right out. As you can see here, this is like in my demo, the spring is being held safe. Whew, okay, that's a big deal. Now we just got to take these upper and lower control arms off, but getting the spring out always makes me feel better. Okay, taking off the upper control arm. You could start loosening things up here, but you'll quickly realize that there's actually a bolt head on either side. So the bolt head's a 3/4, and the wrench is 11/16, or the nut is 11/16. And so we'll start getting these babies off right now. You can see in the middle of the frame and the upper control arm, there are these spacers. And if you're a restoration nut, you'll realize that this one isn't exactly stock. But anyway, what's important is if it's important for you to know what those settings were, when you take these out, make sure to save your shims, right? Let's give this a little tap. Oh, that's not good. I didn't like that. Let's try this one. Okay, there we go. That out. Save your shim. And this one out. This is probably your more, you already see I dropped one. This is your more conventional shim. So save these, and if it's important to you, mark how many shims are on each side and in what position. For me, it doesn't matter because I'm going to rebuild this sucker from the start anyway. So there's our upper control arm, and as you can hear, this is so jacked. I can barely move it. So it's definitely time to take this baby down and get some work done on it. All right, let's move on to the lowers. Okay, so the lower control arm removal is pretty straightforward. You're going to have a bolt on this side, and then on the other side, I'll show you, you have two bolts that go into a bracket. But on this side, this is a 13/16 on top and a 7/8 on the bottom. So let's go ahead and use this. This one was pretty tough, so I used the air wrench, but okay. All right, so that, let's go to the other side. Okay, well, according to pages H174 and H175 of my Corvette assembly manual, we have the upper and lower control arms taken off. So what we did, lower control arm, upper control arm, spring, 3 bolts for the lower, 2 bolts for the upper, and again, here's this little plate that actually is used right there for the lower. And most importantly, again, I'm just going to keep saying it, when we talk about the spring, this is how we got the spring out, using this spring compressor tool, and it's worth every penny. Even you can rent them anywhere. Just keep it for safety. And with that, we're ready to get to work on the rear suspension.